This is Dylan Moore with IRETA TV coming to you today. It is Wednesday, March 30th, 2022, and today I have Snohomish County Prosecutor candidate Brett Rogers here in studio. And even if you don't live in Snohomish County, or maybe you don't even live in Washington State, I think this is one that you're going to want to stick around and listen to, because there's a good chance whatever issues that we're having in Snohomish County, you're probably having at your county at home as well. And there is one topic in particular that I'm going to make sure to bring up, and I think Brett wants to talk about it as well anyway, which is near and dear to, I believe, almost everyone's hearts at this point, which we could refer to as the needle apocalypse, or as I like to refer to it as the tweaker apocalypse. You might like to refer to it as the opioid epidemic, or maybe even the homeless problem. Whatever. This is an issue that is afflicting the entire state, nay, I would even say a large chunk of the country at this point. And as a society, I think we're all dying to know how to fix it. But before we talk about that and a myriad of other subjects, Brett, thank you for taking the time to come into the studio.
Thank you for having me, Dylan. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So the first question, I got to know, what made you decide to run for county prosecutor?
So I'm a parent of adult children, and I've got grandchildren, and former police officer. But setting that aside, just as a resident of Snohomish County and someone who has family, I've been appalled at the way that the crime trends have gone the last dozen or so years. I've moved to Snohomish County in 2005. When I first moved here, we didn't have to sweep athletic fields for needles before the kids could play, and that is all too common now. The crime seems to be out of control. It seems to be unchecked, and far too many of our elected officials, I think, are apathetic to it. Mm-hmm. And so I am an attorney. I've been an attorney since 2008. You need to be an attorney to run for prosecuting attorney, I had a supporter of mine from a previous run contact me and said, "Hey, Brett, have you heard that the prosecuting attorney is not running for re-election this year?"
It's a big deal. Yeah, it's up for grabs.
Incumbency really is a big deal. And so I started to research it and saw that there hadn't been a Republican run for this position in 20 years. So the Democrats have been in control.
The Republican hasn't even run for the position in 20 years?
Has not even run in 20 years. I'm the first candidate in 20 years. So Democrats have held that office unopposed for 20 years. So they wear the current state of affairs around their shoulders. This is Democrat policies. This is soft on crime, catch and release, and I've had enough, and I think other people have had enough. So I found myself in a position to where I feel like I can make a change, and a change needs to be made. So nobody else had stepped up in 20 years, so I thought if nobody else, why not me?
That's awesome. So what would be the most important thing on your agenda if you're in office? Most
important thing on my agenda is we need to start prosecuting crime again. What we really need to do is make criminals
make criminals again.
Yes, make crime illegal again.
Yeah.
I think, given the state of affairs, given the soft on crime, given the catch and release, the sting has really come out of the criminal justice system. I talked to a sheriff's deputy a few weeks ago who said that recently he had gone to a evidence suppression hearing from a case that had first occurred in 2018. So we're going on 4 years, and this person has not yet gone to trial. So, and they're not in custody that long. So who knows? And we didn't go into detail, so I don't know what the crime was. But I think it's fair to assume that whoever that person is, without an intervention, without getting their hand slapped per se,
why wouldn't they do it again?
Why would they change on their own? Sometimes people.
So go ahead.
Sometimes people age out. They get old enough. They're like,
I'm done with that phase.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm getting too old for this. Right. But aside from that, I really don't see why anybody would stop doing what they're doing, especially because some people it's a pretty lucrative, line of work they're in, depending on what they're doing. So we really need to make sure that criminals fear the law again and fear getting caught, because when they get caught, they know they're going to be prosecuted and they're likely going to go to jail or prison. And hopefully get them to change their ways.
Yeah. So, you mind if we get a little specific with some examples? You mentioned evidence suppression. Tell me what that means. So we got this guy. He's out. We don't know what the crime he did. Let's just say it's murder for the sake of argument. It's something really bad. And he's out and about. It's something to do with evidence suppression. Tell me what that means.
So let's use a different example, because hopefully if there was a murder charge, they wouldn't be out on the street. But we really can't rule that out.
Yeah.
So let's use a real life example with the understanding that if I do get elected, I might be overseeing some of these cases. So I have to be a little bit careful of how I approach certain things. But Linwood, I think it was Linwood PD in conjunction with the Sheriff's Department a few weeks back, made a traffic stop, found out that there was a significant amount of drugs in the car after a search warrant, several tens of thousands of dollars in cash in there. But to me, more importantly, was a convicted felon in possession of a stolen firearm. And that...
How long do we need this laundry list to be? Yeah.
Right. And so, and I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but down in Olympia, session after session, they're passing more and more gun control laws. But the problem is too many prosecutors are not prosecuting the laws that we have on the books. So I don't know what good additional laws are going to do. So anyway, this particular person was out, I think within 72 hours, out of jail, because the prosecutor's office, I guess, was not ready to file charges on that. And the judge, unless a prosecutor fights for it, the judge is not going to hold these people in custody pre-trial. So getting back to your question about evidence suppression. So let's say that the defense attorney argues that the initial stop that the officer made, there was something wrong with it. They didn't have probable cause.
Okay.
So there'll be a pre-trial hearing to determine whether or not, say, that stolen firearm can come into evidence, because if the stop itself was improper, then any evidence that comes from that would be improper. It would be improper as well. So going back to this deputy that we were talking about, with the story he was telling me about, he was going to a pre-trial hearing to determine if the evidence that they had against that suspect, if that was going to be admitted into evidence at trial.
Mm-hmm. And that has been drug out for 4 years.
For 4 years, yeah. And I didn't get into detail. So what I'm assuming happened here, because I've seen this happen as I've gotten into this race and see what's going on. What happens is someone commits a crime, they bail or bond out of jail, or even worse, they're released on their personal recognizance, and then the case languishes. The prosecuting attorney's office right now is back on its heels. There's this backlog of cases, so they're letting current criminals out, and then they're dealing with crimes that happened 3 and 4 years ago. And in the meantime, these criminals we're letting out, in my opinion, most of them are probably reoffending.
Right. So you've kind of already answered this a little bit, but let's address it specifically. What is your biggest frustration that you see currently from the county prosecuting office?
They don't, from what I can tell, there doesn't seem to be, and in fact, I'll back up a tiny bit. I think due to COVID, the current prosecutor, who is not running for re-election, helped clear out the jail because of COVID. He didn't want people to, he didn't want inmates, people who are accused of crimes, to get sick in custody.
Wouldn't that be horrible?
Yeah.
Just, I can't imagine how that'd be.
And not. I'm sure this is a topic for another day, but I hate to break it to them. There are therapeutics that work for COVID. It's not a death sentence.
We're already banned from YouTube, so I guess it doesn't matter that you said that. So
we can bleep that out.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. We got banned for talking about stuff like that off of YouTube. But please continue.
Sorry about that. No. So the current prosecuting attorney helped clear the jails and really has made a concerted effort to allow people to remain out of custody pending trial. Well, that's fine if you're well, it's not fine. It's one thing if you're getting these people to trial in a timely manner, like say the next week or the next month. Mm-hmm. But as I said, they're waiting 3 and 4 years before filing charges and dealing with crimes that happened 3 and 4 years ago. While in the meantime, people are continuing to commit new crimes, and they're letting them out right away. So one of my biggest frustrations right now is not many people know that in the state of Washington, there's a presumption that a person that's accused of a crime is going to be released from jail pre-trial. It's up to the prosecutor to argue why that should not be, and that is not occurring. They should definitely be saying this person's a flight risk. They don't have enough ties to the community. They're a danger. They're an ongoing danger to the community. This person needs to remain in custody. And that's not to say the judge will always agree. In fact, they probably won't agree the majority of the time, but
they got to try.
You have to try.
Yeah.
You absolutely have to try. And even if you're not successful, I think that that's something that the public has a right to know. If there's a judge or a handful of judges that routinely ignore the requests of the prosecutor, after the prosecutor has laid out the reasons why, routinely say, no, that's okay. This person's free to go on their personal recognizance.
Yeah. So this creates an interesting case because it sounds like what you're describing, and I believe this is going on all over the country, right? It sounds like what you're describing is it's not so much that the prosecutor is not actively, let me get my negatives right. It's not so much that the prosecutor isn't following the law. They're just spreading it out so long it has the equivalent of not. It has the equivalent result of not following the law.
Yeah, what's the expression? Justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
It's hard to say following the law because prosecutors do have discretion of the types of cases they're going to file charges on, the severity of the charges that they file. They've got tremendous discretion in their work. So. Following the law, not following the law, that's difficult. It's within their discretion. But I don't think that they're taking the crimes that our community is facing seriously enough.
So let's expand on that point. So I didn't realize that the county prosecutors, or maybe any public prosecutor, has a lot of discretion in what they choose to prosecute and don't. I wanted to ask you, what do citizens do if their public prosecutor doesn't enforce the law? Is it just a matter of they just have discretion and that's the end of it?
Yeah, for the public, the main recourse the public has is to vote in a new candidate in 4 years. Then 4 years is a long time.
And there's no legal recourse?
There's no legal recourse that I can think of from a citizen's perspective. They could try a recall. They could try and recall an elected official.
What about like a writ of mandamus?
They
don't really work, do they?
They could try that. They could try that, but again, the prosecutorial discretion is firmly entrenched, unless it was so egregious or there was evidence that.
Collusion or something like that.
Yeah, the prosecutor abused their discretion. Maybe it was a campaign donor or family friend that they decided not to file on. There might be a hook there.
Well, let's take an extreme example. That's not necessarily corruption. Let's take murder because that's a pretty bad situation. There's a murder, and the county prosecutor just goes, I don't feel like prosecuting it. I mean, he could do that, and no one could do anything about it.
Yeah, well, if the prosecutor was in this hypothetical prosecutor were smart, they would probably say why, and they would probably come up with a reason. Say, the witnesses weren't credible, evidence was tainted. If they would. Hopefully, I would assume they would probably try and cover their tracks a little bit and just say, I'm not going to prosecute it. But that is a possibility.
I'm being silent because I'm thinking. Because it's making me think about the fact that, when it comes to the inner workings of the government apparatus that we have, there's a lot of elected positions, and there's a lot of stuff going on that you just don't know about unless somebody has informed you about. And you look at something like the county prosecutor, and you say, okay, what are these functions? And when you realize these functions are really important, and if you put the wrong person in there to do those functions, the functions are going to fall apart.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. and we've seen that in other parts of the country. There have been district attorneys, prosecuting attorneys that have kind of run on a social justice platform that says, "Hey, if I get elected, I'm not going to prosecute certain crimes," and they get elected, and then they don't
because of certain ethnicities or because of certain religious or whatever, right?
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah. What would you say is the most important lesson that you learned working at the Seattle Police Department?
The most important lesson, that's a difficult one. I was with SPD for 18 years. I saw so much. I had so many experiences that it was tough. It's really difficult to pin down one lesson. But I guess where I'll go with that is that, I wanted to be a cop since I was a little kid, and I wanted to get into that line of work because I wanted to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most difficult lessons to learn as a police officer is that there are some people that you can't help, or people need to want to be helped. Now, particularly say drug addiction.
Mm-hmm.
You can intervene all you want, but until that person is ready to make a change, there's really not much you can do.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about drugs, and particularly the really, really bad ones. And just for the record here, I'm more of the idea that making all these drugs illegal in the first place wasn't the best idea. However, that being said, I do believe, for whatever reason, that these drugs, particular ones, have become so potent that they should probably be classified as bioweapons. Right? I mean, now, like fentanyl, you can overdose from like touching it.
Right.
Right? I mean, if I accidentally touch some white powder and I overdose and die, is that a drug or is that a bioweapon?
Hazardous material, right?
It's a hazardous material.
Yeah.
And there's one even stronger than that. It's like called, I'm sure you know that, Corfentil or something like that.
Is that the new one that has been on the news lately?
Yeah, it just blows fentanyl out of the water. It's so powerful. I mean, that one actually is, as far as my understanding, on like the federal, terrorism substance list because I mean it's like you're dead sort of stuff. So going back to the issue that I mentioned at the beginning and you've mentioned already, let's start with needles. We've got this proliferation of drugs that I believe could be classified as bioweapons that are just completely proliferated throughout the community. And obviously the law system that we have from whatever angle is not doing what it needs to do to clean that up out of the community. What powers does the county prosecutor have to be able to address that, and how would you utilize those powers if you're in that position to clean it up?
Yeah, first and foremost, the prosecutor can prosecute drug crimes and make that a priority and really say we're going to take this seriously. As a prime example, kind of ripped from the headlines, about a month ago, the prosecuting attorney's office, to their credit, filed controlled substance homicide charges against a woman who had delivered some fentanyl to a buyer, and I believe had delivered 8 tablets. Buyer took 1, died.
That's bioweapon. That's how potent this crap is.
Right.
Sorry.
So the suspect in that case was arrested, released on her personal recognizance. This is a homicide we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And now I don't know about you, but I personally would find it hard to believe that you have, let's call it what it is. You have got a drug dealer. Mm-hmm. I find it really hard to believe that a drug dealer just started business that day, got their first 8 pills that they then resold, and somebody ended up dying.
And then she quit after that.
And then she quit after that,
yeah.
Right. So here, I really question how seriously the prosecuting attorney's office is taking not just drug crime, but homicide, because a woman is dead. And they decided that there's not a reason for the suspect to remain in custody pending trial. So if that is if that's your vocation, if that's your job, are you going to suddenly stop doing it? I struggle.
You mean as the drug dealer?
Right.
Yeah.
Are you suddenly going to stop dealing drugs, knowing that now you have to pay
No,
for an attorney?
I'm going to go to Walmart and work for $12 an hour instead. Yeah.
Right. I'm facing a murder charge and I need an attorney. Right. I'm going to go work for minimum wage somewhere.
Yeah.
I find that really hard to believe. So, as a society, especially this prosecuting attorney, is not taking drug crime seriously enough. That's something we need to change.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then let's bring it down to say more minor drug crime. And again, like I said, I'm more of the, like, if you want to use drugs, that's your problem. But it does, if you're using drugs and it's negatively impacting everything around you to the point where you're committing crime, again, I think that there's a different line that's been crossed. So what about the fact that it appears that anybody could shoot up anywhere and just throw their needles around anywhere? What's the cleanup procedure for that?
Yeah, those are hazardous materials, and
yeah.
There was an encampment in Everett. Let's keep this.
Everett is an encampment. What are you talking about?
This
is Tweakerville, man.
There was an encampment in Everett, I think last year, that was cleaned up, and I don't want to overstate it, but like 10,000. I read that there were 10,000 needles in that one encampment.
Dozens of volunteers in Snohomish County came together for a large encampment cleanup operation. It was put on by a nonprofit called the Hand Up Project that offers resources to those experiencing homelessness. As KRON 7's Al Thomas reports, this cleanup at Puget Park in Everett is one of the largest private cleanup operations in years.
Today's efforts are focusing on needles. Take a look at these. Giant pile. These are just a few of them. They're expecting to clean up to 10,000 of them today over this 15-acre lot. Lush greenery sweeps Puget Park, but step inside the trees, you'll find a maze of pathways leading to pockets of now empty homeless camps piled high with garbage.
Watch your step. You need some help.
And needles peppering the ground, tossed in piles, even hanging from the trees. Each needle picked up one by one and added to an ever-growing pile.
We're anticipating that we'll have over 10 buckets full of needles.
So if that's not a hazardous situation, if that's not bad for the environment, I don't know what is.
So I digress here a little bit, but I used to own a junk removal company, and we did do some tweaker pad cleanups before. We quit doing them, but it is like the most horrifying thing that you could possibly imagine when people who are doing these drugs live together. And it's not just the needles. I mean, it turns into a chop shop. It turns into an open cesspool because, the water gets shut off and the electricity does get shut off because they're not paying the bills. And then someone burns a hole in the roof because they're making meth. And now it's raining inside the house. There's mold everywhere. There's rats running everywhere. There's needles everywhere. There's feces in the... I mean, it's so horrifying. And, the neighbors, it's like slowly turning into this biohazard junkyard. And the rats are starting to run into the neighbors. I mean, like the public health hazard level that this stuff is, beyond just saying, oops, I don't want to accidentally step on a needle. It's unreal how big of an impact that is.
It is, and
yeah.
I think that really that's the situation you laid out. I think really does a good job of highlighting all the failures of the various systems of our government. I mean,
sorry to interrupt you. I keep that thought. When I was cleaning this place up at Cedar Woolley, right? It was right on Highway 20. People were honking at us and waving because they were so happy that we were finally cleaning this place up. I think it was the complaint investigator for the county stopped by and talked to us that several criminals had been living there. One of them had 9 warrants out for his arrest, but he was in a wheelchair, so the cops couldn't put him in jail.
Yeah. I can't speak to that.
Yeah.
That one specifically. I don't know if it was that particular jurisdiction didn't want to mess with the wheelchair, or if the issue with the jail,
like that.
Right.
Stuff at that level of we're creating a toxic waste dump here. People are committing crime. I don't know what the warrants were for. I mean, maybe it was minor stuff. I have no idea. But just the concept of this thing has been here for years. You could see from the chop shop. The neighbor came and talked to us and said, She told the police, if you want to hide out in my back shed at night and watch them to see if you can catch them, please come over. And they didn't want to do it. Right. And I mean, I don't know what internal politics are going on in Skagit County or whatever, but that's the landscape we're looking at here.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I guess going back, there's a failure on so many levels of our government. You know, where's the health department? The situation you described.
Where's the Department of Ecology?
Where's the Department of Ecology?
EPA.
Why isn't the local jurisdiction condemning that property? Or if a property owner is allowing that,
they had over 500 complaints.
Yes.
The complaint investigator said there's over 500 complaints here.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
So what powers does the county prosecutor not have in order to address a problem like this that would need to be addressed by another form of government or even private action?
Yeah, so the prosecuting attorney's office, it's not an investigatory agency, so we do rely on other agencies to bring cases to us. It's not just a matter of somebody pointing a finger and saying, look at this crime occurring here, do something about it. We need
the police to gather the evidence and arrest the perpetrator or the suspect or whatever. Yeah,
correct.
Yes. I did have Senator Keith Wagner in here on Monday. He was running for Secretary of State, and this was actually a big question. All right, it's not that he is running for Secretary of State, and this is a big question that we discussed of, and I also want to bring up this topic, but we were talking a lot about election integrity and voter integrity, and a lot of the discussion was a lot of people think the Secretary of State has the power to do X, Y, and Z, and they don't. Right? And we were talking about, where does that power lie? And I was just thinking that might jostle your thinking a little bit of, does the county prosecutor have actually quite a bit of power, or is it more spread out like the Secretary of State going, well, the auditor has that power. Sorry, well, that's the law coming from the legislature. I can't do anything about it until they fix that law.
Yeah. There are some constraints that we're bound by the laws as they exist. So we are dependent on the legislature to, have decent laws on the books.
Or even the county council, right?
County council,
case. Yeah.
But as I've kind of either said or alluded to a few times already, I don't think we're doing a good job prosecuting the laws that are currently on the books. So there's certainly room for improvements and maybe stiffer penalties. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
Many people don't realize that when criminals are convicted, there's sentencing guidelines, and there's this big formula that's gone through for recommended sentences. So the prosecuting attorney can't just say, okay, you did a hit and run, you're going to prison for 50 years. That's not possible.
He has to work inside what the law says he's allowed to prosecute for.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then requesting the appropriate sentence, which again is up to a judge. So it's not even up to the prosecutor to say how long somebody will end up serving.
Right. I got one more tweaker question. Do you know, and I don't know the answer to this, do you know where the supply of unending needles is coming from?
I don't. There are needle exchanges out there. And this dates back to the AIDS epidemic. That's how needle exchanges got started. We're doing this as a harm reduction system to try and help people not get
share
AIDS.
Needles.
Right.
Yeah.
Not share needles and catch AIDS. So at what point though have we, we're doing more harm than good.
So my question is, can you prosecute that?
Potentially,
where the source is, the spring of the needle well, are you able to prosecute that?
We would need to take we would need a real specific set of circumstances and take a real hard look at it. But I think it would be difficult, maybe not impossible, but
because they're likely following the law to the T, right?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Well, hopefully not. Then get them. Get them out of here. Funny note. I don't know if you noticed, as you're pulling in here, they've moved or they gone out of business. I don't know, but the sign is still up. There was a treatment center in this building, and across the street is a Suboxone clinic. Now, I don't know the specific details on what goes on in either of these, but that kind of seems like a revolving door sort of situation, right? And I guess that would be an example of something that the county prosecutor can't fix, right? That's a law sort of thing.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point and a great thing to consider, that is much more of a societal issue than can be solved by you or I or the prosecuting attorney. Is that really what are we mitigating things by just giving addicts a different drug, or
here's some heroin light. This will help you get off heroin.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you're addicted to heroin light, right?
Yeah.
And then when that runs out, you
go get the heroin.
Get some heroin because it's cheap. Yeah.
What's your favorite pro bono story?
So my favorite pro bono story is, not every, certainly not every employer is well, now I'm stumbling on this one. Not every employer is unscrupulous, right? But there are some out there, and
every employer is unscrupulous.
Correct.
Okay.
That's where I was going with that. But there are some out there that hire people at minimum wage, and they understand that people making minimum wage really can't afford to hire an attorney. So there were a couple times where people came to me that had wage theft issues, where their boss was screwing them over, and the boss was like, "Well, what are you going to do about it?"
Yeah,
and so
I'm going to get Brett Rogers.
So there were a couple times where really all it took was a letter saying, "Hey, you're not following the law. You're on the verge of getting in serious trouble here. All my client wants is to get the pay that's owed to her, and sometimes a letter is enough to do that." And so that's one of my favorite stories where somebody really couldn't afford to get help. I was able to help very simply, very quickly, and they got their money. They quit that job. They moved on with their life. Yeah,
it's a good story. It's a good story.
Thank you.
I want to talk about election integrity now. And I am going to connect this to the county prosecutor because you might be wondering, what does the county prosecutor have to do with election integrity? So I'm not sure if you're aware. Well, I mean, first of all, election integrity is on everybody's mind right now. There's a heightened awareness on it. And I'm not sure if you're aware that right now, across the country, but even specifically in Washington State, there are people canvassing, looking to clean up the voter rolls. And then if you're unaware of this and you haven't watched the other videos that I've interviewed people talking about canvassing, it's you take the voter roll, which is public record, and you compare it to, say, the USPS change of address list or the Social Security death list, and you say, okay, this person voted, and the Social Security death list says that they died in 1996. Well, let's go to that house and see if that person is actually there. And the canvassers are finding sometimes they're actually there, and there's just some screw up with the lists. Fine. But they're also finding a lot of times, no, that person is actually dead. And so they're getting a list of anomalies, and apparently they're finding a lot. So when they get this list of here are suspected houses, it's like 40 to 50% anomaly of they show up and the person who voted isn't there and the people who live there have no idea, or they show up and it's a abandoned lot, and there's 17 people registered to vote there. Some craziness like that. So I'm curious, and it might not even be within your jurisdiction. I don't know. If you saw that there was sufficient evidence that voting crime happened or election crime happened in Snohomish County, would you be willing to prosecute that?
Absolutely. Election integrity is so important.
Yeah.
And, I think too many people have lost or are losing faith and confidence in our election system. And now it's funny, not to turn, this should be an issue that everybody agrees on. It's funny, 10, 15 years ago, Democrats were concerned about election integrity, and now all of a sudden they don't care. But I think everybody should care, and I absolutely will prosecute those if we're presented with a winnable case. I've got to caveat that a little bit.
Right.
You
can't waste your time.
I can't ethically charge somebody with a crime that I can't prove.
Right.
So yes, if a good case is brought to me of election fraud, I will absolutely prosecute.
That's great to hear. And then now I wanted to bring up the next one. So Dan, can you pull up that law that I got ready? So this is RCW 29A.08.810, which talks about how to challenge someone's voter registration. These are the details on if you suspect that somebody is fraudulently registered to vote or doesn't exist or an illegal alien or whatever, and that they're voting, this is how it's challenged. And if you read this law, it is beyond ridiculous because, for the most part, another registered voter has to challenge. The fact that they're registered to vote is presumptive evidence that they have the right to vote, and you have to overcome that presumptive evidence by you personally, the neighbor, have to do it, right? Except there is one exception. Can you scroll down to the place where I highlighted? Keep going. Keep going. So right there, where I highlighted, a person's right to vote may be challenged by another registered voter or the county prosecuting attorney. Did you know that?
I didn't, just as a funny aside,
Yeah.
people expect lawyers and judges to know everything, to know every aspect of every law.
I didn't expect you to know
and that's
that
not
one.
the case. Sometimes you need to refresh your memory. Sometimes you need to, brush up on some stuff. So no, that's good to know.
So I have a question backing that up.
Okay.
I didn't expect you to know that because that was pretty obscure. But so going back to the canvassers, if these canvassers go around Snohomish County and they're like, we've got 1,500 anomalies. We went to the door. Here's the sworn affidavit. Here's the picture of the empty lot. Here's the voter roll, and here's the death record. All, and they give you all the evidence. Would you be willing to go to the county auditor and challenge those voter registrations?
Yes, and one of the roles of the county prosecutor is to sit on the canvassing board.
Really?
Yes.
Yes.
So,
I didn't know that.
So hey, we're even now, right?
Yeah.
I told you something you didn't know today. So yeah, I absolutely would be willing to challenge those voters, those registrations, and that would be something that to be honest, I don't know all the ins and outs of the canvassing board. So, but that's something that the prosecuting attorney does sit on.
What I just described. Oh, sorry. When you say the canvassing board, were you talking about the committee that meets or the people that are going out knocking on the doors?
The committee that meets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. No, that's great to hear because I'm hearing from the people I've interviewed who are the ones either doing it themselves or directing these canvassers that they're being met with various levels of cooperation from the various auditors. And I could imagine it's a much different posture if the county prosecutor comes with the packet of stuff versus Joe Schmo with the packet of stuff from down the street.
Right.
That's great to hear. Is there anything about the county prosecuting office that people should know that they typically don't?
Well, let's see. This is me come as an outsider, so I've got plenty to learn about the inner workings of that office myself. But there is, the people think of the prosecutor probably just as the criminal aspect, the criminal side of it. There is a civil component where if somebody sues the county, it's the prosecuting attorney's office. The civil side defends the county.
Okay.
It can initiate lawsuits on behalf of the county. But the prosecuting attorney's, at least the office, also serves as a legal advisor to the county council, various heads of agencies of the county government. So that is, I think, an opportunity for someone who, who recognizes that the people are the ultimate client, and I represent the people of Snohomish County. I might give different advice to various county agencies than somebody who, say, is a lifetime employee of that agency that has friendships across the agencies, that cares maybe less about what's best for the people and more about what the county wants to accomplish, if that makes sense. Now,
it does.
The county, those employees of those officers of the county are the client, and they're owed a duty of care, and they're owed good advice. But I think there would be opportunities where I could say, I'm not articulating this very well. I would approach this by not doing everything I could to find a way to let the county do what it wants to do. I would be,
You try to be as neutral as possible.
As neutral as possible, and say, you know what, as you've proposed this, I don't think that's legal, and I don't think you should be doing this.
That leads me to maybe think of another question. Philosophically, and try not to give you a vague answer on this one, what is the purpose of the county prosecutor?
The purpose, well, that's the purpose of the county prosecutor is to represent the state of Washington in this county when it comes to criminal prosecutions. It, like as I said, provides legal advice to the county council and the various
Those are the
boards and
specific
commissions.
details. Philosophically speaking, so let me see if I could say this better. So if we look at the Declaration of Independence, philosophically speaking, the government is there to provide for the welfare, the defense, and the of the people, right? Washington State, philosophically speaking, is there to defend the rights. And I've pointed this out before. Washington State was, I'm getting off a little tangent here, but I think this is interesting, was equally concerned about corporate power as they were about government power, and they worked to craft the Constitution that it could be applied both toward the corporate and toward government in the event that rights are being suppressed. Because before Washington was made a state, this was after the Industrial Revolution, and companies were able to move out to Washington Territory that were so big and powerful they essentially acted as governments. And I don't know if you've read this in the Washington State Constitution. You have the right to bear arms, but nothing about this suggests that you have the right to hold private armies. And when I read that for the first time, I'm like, they put that in there because somebody did that. And when you look at the history, that's exactly what happened here in Washington State. So backing up and trying to get back to the question. So the philosophical idea underpinning the United States is a government there to serve the people, and maybe one of the philosophical ideas of the Washington State is to say, okay, in addition to serving the people, we also want to protect not only from government but from corporate. Do you think that there, in that sort of language and framework, can you give me a good philosophical answer of what the purpose of the county prosecutor is?
I would say philosophically, I would say it's just as government as a whole. It exists to protect the rights of individuals in this county. As the chief law enforcement officer, if you will, in Snohomish County, I think philosophically it's the prosecuting attorney's job to hold everybody accountable, and that's accountability is for everybody. It's for you, it's for me, it's for people accused of crimes, it's for government elected officials. Accountability is for everybody. So I think philosophically, it's the job of the prosecutor to kind of be a watchdog for the benefit of all people.
Because the reason I asked that was based on the answer you gave before of you saying, well, I don't want to let the county run amok. If I think they're doing something illegal, I want to stop that. And it made me think of, philosophically speaking, well, what's the purpose of the county? Well, it's wrapped up in the purpose of the United States, wrapped up in the purpose of the Constitution. And I think you answered it well, which is to say that, well, as the county prosecutor, philosophically, my goal is to protect the rights of the individuals. And if the county is overstepping those rights, you said this, you would advise them not to do that.
Yeah, correct.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't stop them because that's not your job, but you do have the ability to give that advice and say, well, I don't think you're going to win a court case, if this sort of thing comes up.
Well, that's just ultimately it all goes back to the people, right? Because the people of this county and taxpayers. Because at the end of the day, if the county is doing something they shouldn't be doing, and they get sued, who ends up footing the bill? We all do.
Yep.
The county doesn't have a printing press. The county can't just conjure money out of the air. If the county does something wrong and is on the hook for a settlement,
they get it from me and you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there any topic that I didn't hit that you feel is important to bring up?
Well, let's see. Hopefully we're not pulling back the curtain too much, but we had a little chat before we started today, and one of the things that we started to discuss but didn't quite get there was criminal justice reform and the whole notion of maybe we should not prosecute certain crimes because certain communities are disproportionately affected. And I think that's absolutely the wrong
nonsense.
approach. Total nonsense. Lady Justice has a blindfold on her face for a reason. Equal protection under the law. It's the law applies to everyone equally, regardless of what you look like. And in fact, by saying that somebody thinks that because somebody looks a certain way, they're either more apt to commit crime, or they're not able to control their impulses, or it's not their fault because they're not smart enough. I think that is racist and offensive, or whatever ist we happen to be talking about.
It removes agency from the person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is incredibly offensive. You have no agency, You're an automaton, so I'll just make all your decisions for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm a legal justice proponent, equal protection under the law applies to everybody equally, as opposed to social justice, which is different rules for different people. And the two are not compatible as far as I'm concerned.
Based on that, did you want to make any mention of your challenger?
Sure. It's funny.
And what's his name again? Cummings?
Jason
Cummings, yeah.
He's currently the chief of the civil division of the prosecuting attorney's office. He's been there, I believe, in that role, I think he's been there for about 14 years. So he's, I'm not sure exactly how their hierarchy work, where say like the chief of staff fits in, but he's essentially the number 3 or 4 person in the office. So having been there for that long, he's not the elected official currently, but I would like to think if you're that high up in that organization for that length of time, you probably have some sway. So the problems that we're facing with crime, even though he's on the civil side, I personally think he has a hand in, because if he thought something was broken, he would have a duty to try and fix it,
or at least talk about
at least talk about it.
My hands are tied. I can't fix it, but here's the problem that I'd really like to have fixed. Yes.
And I get that he's in the office right now and he reports to the current prosecuting attorney, but so far he has not come out and said anything about what his opinions are about the level of crime or what he's going to do differently. So that to me means that he's okay with what's going on right now, and we're probably going to get more of the same if he's elected. On his website,
I was going to bring that up.
On the front page of his website, he says that he's going to use his prosecutorial discretion to, and I'm paraphrasing here, best serve our diverse communities. And to me, that's social justice.
He's focused on social justice, which is what you said, different rules for different people.
Right.
Or, I don't know if that's what's going on in his head, but the evidence from his website and from his track record appear to imply that.
So that's my takeaway. That's my read of that. So we're polar opposites, I think, when it comes to that. To our approach of the office. One of my other main concerns, and this is funny because I'm not a career politician, and one of the things I was told is you're not supposed to talk about your opponent, right? You're supposed to focus on yourself. But I think there really are some clear distinctions between us that need to be highlighted. One of the other ones was shortly after the 2020 election, Snohomish County was sued regarding some component of the election. I don't have instant recall and all that. And Jason Cummings was quoted in the paper saying he was disappointed to see that the ideas from Arizona were finding their way up here to Snohomish County.
Those horrible Arizonan ideas.
So that to me displays a complete lack of curiosity. You're concerned about the notion that some people are worried that an election was fair, but nobody's ever taken the time to actually look at the facts
and see if it was fair.
And see if it was fair.
Yeah.
So to me, that means he dismissed out of hand. He dismissed that idea, dismissed the idea that there was any possible nefarious activity. So I don't think we want someone like that doesn't seem to care about election integrity running our county prosecutor's office.
Well said.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you.
Anything else before we wrap up?
No. Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. How do we find you? Where's your website?
If you give me a chance to vote myself, yes. Yeah. So go to votebrettrogers.com.
Yeah.
I can always use financial support. I've got a hard time asking for money, but it unfortunately makes the world go round.
Ask for $1 million.
Yard sign.
Go for it.
It costs money for to print up yard signs and campaign mailers and whatnot. That's just how it is.
We made him pay $1,000 just to be on this show. No, we didn't.
But there are other ways people can be involved.
Yeah.
Doorbelling isn't for everybody, but if you're interested in doorbelling, you can sign up to be a volunteer on my website. If you're willing to host a meet and greet, either at your house, your business, or your church group, I'd love to meet people, hear what their concerns are, and then give them a chance to meet me one-on-one. It's so much better, I think, to meet somebody in person and get a feel for who that person is, and then they can ask me questions. We can have Q&A. That's one of the benefits of not being a career politician is that I haven't learned to not answer questions yet. So I'm willing.
I don't have to hide that thing that I did 3 election cycles ago. Yeah.
Right. So no, I'm happy to answer questions. VoteBrettRogers.com. Could use your help. Go there, learn more about me, sign up to be a volunteer.
Share this podcast.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks, Brett. I look forward to the day when my children can play Without having to sweep for needles, like you just said at the park.
Absolutely, yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So this has been Dylan Moore with IRETA TV, and I've had, like I said, we've been talking about Snohomish County prosecutor candidate Brett Rogers here in studio. And to visit us at IRETA TV, you can go to ireta.tv, and you'll see all the plethora of social media to follow us at. One of your choice, sans YouTube, because we've been banned, like I mentioned. But other than that, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.